strictly mine, and that nobody else might be able to actually do. That only I could do. So
that's what I mean. There are some solos where it's just it has to be Todd or nobody else.
that's that's all I can ask for. At this point.
That's the essence. Your repertory, this massive and impressive body of work. However, it's odd because you're not really covered that much. I remember Robert Palmer doing "Can We Still Be Friends." I can't really think of that many other tunes.
Well, I think that there are possibilities. Well, there's a number of reasons. One is that my publishing has been held by a rather inept company. It was I was fortunate and unfortunate at the same time to be associated with Albert Grossman's organization very early in my solo career. As soon as I left the NAS, I more or less got involved with Albert Grossman and the Albert Grossman empire, which meant that not only was he managing me, but he had my publishing, and I was also on his record label. So that if things went badly, they went equally badly on all fronts.
Is that right?
And probably the best thing he did was the management. And he probably should have stuck to the management. If I had been handled by a label other than Bearsville, then I might not have suffered the benign neglect that my albums suffered throughout my career. And also, if there had been another publisher, they might more aggressively have sought cover versions of the songs and things like that. But unfortunately, when I got involved with Albert, he was less and less interested in show business per se, and more interested in being a restaurateur, which was what he started out as. And so that benign neglect affected every aspect of my professional life. The only thing it didn't affect was my career as a producer, because all it required of him was to negotiate the original deal, and didn't require any of that ongoing support. So he actually made me the world's highest paid producer, and that was probably the biggest service he performed for me.
Do you think publishing offers have been nixed as a result of your association with him?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, like I said, very few people have really done your songs.
Well, it's not that. It's people have to discover the material. Someone has to. People, when they're looking for records to cover, usually don't go out and listen to every record in the world looking for songs. What happens is that normal publishing companies, aggressive publishing companies, will put together, say, a collection of ballads, or a collection of various kinds of songs. They become aware of who's about to make a record and who's looking for material, and make sure that the songs get to them, things like that.
Is that right? They actually provide that kind of a service?
Yes, that's what they're supposed to do.
Is that how Tiffany got a hold of Tommy James?
Well, I don't know. Some things seem obvious, but I think the better publishing companies actually make aggressive attempts at placing material. There are still publishing companies who have writers on retainer. And whatever they write, has to be placed somewhere, or else it's worthless. So they go out looking for people to record the material.
Steinberg, Kelly,
Yeah.
appearing everywhere. What was I going on to here? Looking back over your albums in retrospect, which was your favorite?
That's a question that never elicits a satisfactory response from me. It's you can say the stupid obvious thing, which is they're all like your children, which in some way they actually are, because creation being kind of the a sublimation of procreation, it's almost the same process,
Right.
But it's also if you think too hard, if you think about one of them, then you find things about it that aren't present in the other ones, and then you want to say, well, that's the favorite, but then you think about another one, and you say, well, that one might be my favorite. My favorite one might usually be the most recent one, because I feel that it's a culmination of everything I'm trying to do. But at the same time, I don't think about my past records. I usually, when I've completed a record, I listen to it over and over and over and over and over again to try and study what I've done. And then when I'm finished with that, I almost kind of discard it in my mind, almost kind of like consider it ancient history, and start trying to take what I've learned and apply it towards the next record, and completely involve myself in the concept of whatever the next record is going to be. And that's the process that I'm involved in now. So when somebody says, "What's your favorite last record?" my mind is on the next record.
How about among the people that you know best, people who appreciate your work? Like, say, when the CD reissue series came out, which album do you think they bought first?
Well, probably a lot of them bought Something Anything, but I do have a little insight into what their favorite records are, because we have a fan magazine that's actually was started and is run completely by fans and has no real substantial support from us. And they occasionally will have they'll take a poll of the subscribers and try and see what their favorite records are, and the answers are sometimes unusual. Sometimes the records that did the worst commercially turn out to be their favorite albums. Like, for instance, I think Healing is one of the top ones. Something they sort of changed from survey to survey, the top 3 or 4 or 5. And a more recent album will always place very high, but Healing is a favorite album, and I'm pleased about that, because it's one of my what I consider to be one of my more successful ventures. And for instance, Utopia album, the one that always scores really high is Oops, Wrong Planet. Maybe the Adventures in Utopia probably is the one that scores highest on that. But Oops, Wrong Planet, which was one that got scathing reviews when it first came out, and really didn't do that well commercially, except for the fact that it had something of a very minor hit for us. It later became a hit for England, Dan and John Ford Coley, but that one always scores very high for some reason, And I think the reason why is because it's one of the records where you can really hear the personality of the band in it. It doesn't contain a whole lot of extra stuff, And we do that kind of regularly. Try and do an album where we don't do a lot of overdubbing. Every once in a while we feel the desire to experiment, and probably the other members of the band feel that desire more than I do, because I have the opportunity to do my own records. And those albums, everyone likes those albums, but I think the ones they like best are the ones that are much more raw and much less ornate, and contain a real sort of black and white picture of what the band is like.
I suppose I should ask you about what happened with XTC there. I mean, when we heard the news initially, at least in my case, XTC's always been one of my favorite bands.
Mm-hmm. They were one of my favorite bands as well.
You've been one of my favorite musicians as well, and I thought, wow, this is too good to be true. And then, I really like the album too, but I heard that there was a lot of trouble between you and the band.
Well, me and Andy in particular,
What was the problem?
Well, we're both fairly headstrong personalities. Obsessive, but I think the problem really stems from the fact that Andy, the XTC and the band in general, Andy being, let's say, if the band had 5 people in it, Andy would be 3 of them, something like that, But the band has 3 people, so there's, you get the general effect. Andy kind of lords it over everybody, and he wasn't used to dealing with the real producer, and.
But then again, they'd worked with Steve Lillywhite for years, who always left his real signature that identified.
Yeah, but Steve Lillywhite essentially is a sound. He concentrates on sound. There are producers whose trademark is a certain aural ambience, and that my trademark is less that and more a certain musical coherence, and I think that Andy was just not used to working with someone who would argue with him to the